podcast that explores the way. I'm going to edit that out for the video, for the real podcast. Welcome to the Corona Shift, the podcast that explores how performers get by when the bars are closed and the stages are canceled. You know what? We're going to skip the intro this week because I'm just so excited about this show. We are on episode number 8 right now. So when you're seeing this, it's going to be kind of mid to late August. Some fun things to check out. Coming up, we're doing live shows again with Comic Sans. So check out August 25th in Toronto, August 26th in Waterloo. Comic Sans Hot Girl Summer. We're going to be celebrating the last little vestige of summer that we can. What else did I want to tell you? This is a very special episode. We have a special guest. We're going to be doing a little Freaky Friday thing. We're switching places. We're changing hats. We're mixing it up. So I am going to be interviewed by a very wonderful guest host and good friend of mine and amazing, hilarious comedian. And we will introduce them after the clip. Thanks for tuning in. All right. And here we are. We have the wonderful Kelly Sanchuck joining us today. Hi, Kelly.
Hello. I'm so excited.
All right. I'm gonna just give you the show. It's your show now. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I am a comedian. I'm a music teacher. I work in admin during the day because rent's got to get paid. And I'm a musician. That's what I am.
You're so many things.
Thank you.
You're so many cool, awesome things, and successful in all of them. It's so wonderful to know you. Yay!
Oh my goodness. The feeling's mutual. My goodness.
Oh my God, yay. There's going to be a lot of this during the show, by the way, of just like, oh, no, you're great. No, you're great. No, you're amazing. You're wonderful. Yeah. We are each other's biggest fans.
Truth.
Yay. All right. How would you like to start? What would you like to?
I just want to know, we talked a little bit before about how you're doing, but I just want to know, like how you're doing right now. It's this weird thing where when I started, everyone I felt like was checking in to be like, are you okay? Are you okay? And now the new normal, I hate that term, but anyway, it's set in. So how are you dealing with this life now?
Yeah, I'm starting to acclimatize. I'm starting to relearn how to communicate and how to have conversations with people. It's so hard because like you like those questions you ask people when you see them after a very long time, like what's new or what have you been up to? Like those are really loaded questions now. We don't want to we're kind of afraid to ask that because we know it's new. Nothing. But yeah, I think I've been trying to create a really good normal in my home and during the quarantine, and now it's just trying to piece those two parts of my life together of like the outdoors and the indoors. I'm starting to perform a little bit now. I'm starting to do shows and be back on stage, and I have quite a few shows scheduled for the rest of the month. So I'm feeling hopeful about being a performer again.
Yeah.
And overall, I'm just doing well. I think quarantine taught me that you can have balance in your life, and you can find the time to do those things you really love. Like I've started foraging for wild edibles in High Park, and like learning a bit of I hate the term bushcraft, but like just how to be outdoors and know what there is outdoors. And I have a camping trip planned with some people at the end of the month, and I'm excited to just get back to nature a little bit.
So are
And
you going to use all of these things that you're learning about bushcraft, as you say, and are you gonna show off a little bit when camping?
yeah, of course. Of course. No, actually a big thing when quarantine hit, and it was so sudden, and everyone was like, how do I exist like this now? I didn't have a lot of momentum at first, and I just binge watched like Naked and Afraid and Alone and all of these like survive in the wilderness TV shows. And like I grew up in Northern Ontario, so you know, it, I'm the realist with it, but
You're
but
like apocalypse preparing.
yeah, I just found a new love for it. And in this time, it's so good to be like, it's kind of practical, because we do need to maybe, there are some issues with food supply, and there are some issues with supply chains and things like that. So yeah, but
Oh my god.
it's all just for fun. It's not, I'm not actually trying to survive. I'm just trying to pass the time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing ever. Okay. So, okay, back up because I have lots of questions now. So,
Mm-hmm.
your balance that you're finding, like, do you have a daily schedule that you stick to now to try to keep some sort of, are you finding that free flowing life feels better than having a strict regime? Or are you finding that having some sort of schedule is balancing out things?
Yeah, I had to develop a routine for myself just because of my ADHD and my like my executive dysfunction and things like that. If I give myself the freedom, I will one day I'll work 18 hours, and the next day I won't want to do anything, and that's really unhealthy. So when I left the brokerage that we were both working at, when I left the brokerage, I decided to keep a full-time schedule. So Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, I was at my desk, and this was just a few weeks before the pandemic hit. So I put that structure in place initially, and then I just continued that throughout. So I still have like a full-time job as a producer and comedian, but it's just at my desk at home without pants and better coffee and all of these things. So, and then that, especially with like my partner and I, with Trisha and I both being home all the time, um, we found that like we need somebody to talk to. So we try to schedule time together and take advantage of that time. So like at 5 o'clock, it's no more work. And it's us time. And that we're starting to see fade a little bit, because I'm starting to do evening things and shows again, but we're still making that effort to really focus on spending time together and having time not working. So whereas before, when I was working full time, or even when I just had like a coffee shop job, I was juggling all of those things, and then I would get home from work and I would still have so much work to do. So now it's given me a lot more time, and it's allowed me to take advantage of the time in a much better way, in a much more balanced way.
That's so
Yeah.
lovely to hear. Like a lot of couples don't, they they're finding that both working from home is such a negative thing, and it doesn't have to be negative. There just has to be, you just have to put effort into the right places. Maybe, do you find that?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, it can be a it can be a negative thing as well. I mean, our jobs are very different, where Trisha has to be at the computer from 9 to 5, but she isn't always necessarily busy. Whereas with me, when I'm at the computer, I'm focused and I'm busy. When I'm at the office, Um, but I'm more flexible. So like walking the dog in the afternoon is something I can do. But she can get bored through the day and like want attention and ask me to do things or like show me funny YouTube videos or something, and then that throws me off of my focus. Um, so that's something we had to work on, and then also just being in a place together. Like we've given each other the luxury or the privilege of like the bedroom's mine for an hour or two, or I'm sitting outside, don't follow me. And we have our alone time and then we have our together time. So it's been much better and also a bit of a struggle, but we're finding balance, I think.
I
I,
mean, it sounds like it.
yeah.
So you were one of the busiest people that I knew before the pandemic hit. You had so much on your plate. So, okay, talk to me a little bit about what you had going on before everything shut
All right. So before the pandemic hit, try to bring myself back there. I was working full time with the brokerage because bills and rent. And then I was working on Comic Sans, which is a production company. And at the time, Comic Sans was really, really building up. So we had shows in Waterloo and Hamilton. We were building up in Toronto, and then all of the other Toronto shows. Comic Sans was selected to be a showcase venue for Just for Laughs. So March 18th was supposed to be our JFL showcase. So I was spending a lot of time producing that and doing a lot of publicity and media promotion and trying to get important people to that showcase and really hustling that. Also, I was performing a bunch and hosting a bunch too. So the end of February and early March saw me. I was just having like a full schedule, and I was involved in Sketchfest. I did a keynote speech for a Women's Day brunch, and I was working as a host for Sketchfest just before the pandemic hit. And I remember the last night, what I learned eventually to be my last time on stage for a really long time. I was hosting a Sketchfest event, and I just felt like I had hit a new platform, like I'd hit a new level, like I kind of leveled up. You know, when you start as a comedian, you get to a point where you're comfortable and you can flow and you just understand it a little bit more, and there are little breakthroughs that happen in your career, and I just hit one of those where I'm like, I get hosting and I can be confident and secure in it, and I felt like I was doing a really good job. So I just left that show with such a high, and then literally 48 hours later, my entire schedule completely cleared
down?
and all of my shows were canceled. And yeah, then I went to nothing. So before the pandemic hit, I was a comedian, I was a producer, I was a full-time employee with the brokerage. And I was also, there was something else too that was just like, I don't know.
Were
But
you working on your talent agency?
that's something I've been working on in the background for about a year. For a year before the pandemic hit. So about a year and a half. So that was in production, but it wasn't something that I was very, very actively working on because the showcase was happening and because there were these bigger things that were going on. Yeah, but I still full-time producer, full-time comedian, full-time receptionist with the brokerage, and still trying to find time to be with friends and family.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So the platform, so you are now performing. Have you hosted anything?
No, I've hosted some online shows. All of the Comic Sans shows I've been hosting, but that's only been 3 or 4 of them, and it's a completely different experience. I mean, I'm seated at my computer. I just have notes. I'm basically reading credits. It's really, really difficult to perform and especially to host because you don't have that connection with the audience. So I just hope I'm likable enough reading credits and giving a little intro. Yeah.
Okay, so going back, the platform that you hit when everything stops, like now that you're getting back in front of an audience, are you finding that you're able to find some of that feeling again? Or do you find that because there's time that's lapsed, it's gone back and you've got to work to push yourself forward a little bit more?
It's just like riding a bicycle. It's messy and clumsy and and if you hit the ground running, you might break your wrist. But no, it's some of it coming back to it and performing a couple more times now. It's definitely like starting over from scratch. Like I was nervous and anxious before going on stage the first time, which I hadn't felt in a really, really long time. I was unsure. I couldn't rely on that memory process to just automatically deliver the material. I had to really think about it, and then that took me out of the performance. And I also old jokes. How do so much has changed. We're all so different now. Those old jokes don't really apply anymore. So I'm not really comfortable performing the older material. Like I fall back on them a little bit, but even the first real show that I did was a 20-minute spot, and it was almost entirely new material.
So have you been writing new material this whole time, or did you just knowing that things were opening up, did you like find inspiration in knowing the stage time was near?
Have I been writing material this whole time? Oh my god. No, I couldn't. I had a really hard time writing before. When I don't have a goal, it's really difficult to write just for the sake of writing or for the sake of exploration. I've done everything. I've set time aside to write. I've done stream of consciousness writing. I've done everything. And if it's not for a reason, I have a really difficult time doing it. So there were a few notes that I had jotted down in the last 5 months that were like, this could be funny one day. And I worked on those in the week or 2 leading up to the shows. But it's all been, I finally have stage time and I don't want to do my old jokes, so I better come up with something new. Yeah, and writing them all kind of just before the show. Because my writing process is very much interactive and on stage. Like I'll either write in the environment of a show, so while I'm watching other performers or just before or just after, but a lot of my writing happens on stage. So I'll have a premise or a few key points to hit, but all of that writing, and figuring out a joke and finding ways to tell a story happens on stage. So when I don't have that stage, I can't write.
And so then how did that work with the online shows? I know you did a few of them. So is that must totally change your entire writing process then, because you're not even really getting that much feedback.
Yeah. Online shows, the way I wrote during the pandemic in the first 5 months is writing short monologues for the podcast. and trying to incorporate some jokes and things like that. But absolutely screaming them into the ether and not knowing if they were funny or not. And they probably weren't. But for online shows, the couple of shows that I did, so there was one show, there were like 2 online shows where I did my Showcase 7 that I was working on before the pandemic hit, and it felt really unnatural and really inauthentic. So I stopped performing comedy on online shows, and I just focused on producing. And then for hosting, it was again not trying to be funny, but just facilitating the other comics and trying to find different ways to do things. Because from my experience and talking to a lot of other comics, um, stand-up comedy, the way we know it, doesn't translate to an online forum. It doesn't work. We have the skills to do so many other things, but to strictly be stand-up comedians, there's not really much for us online in online platforms. So what can you do?
I, that, I think that that's a really interesting point for, maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot for this, but for comedians who understand that there is an audience interaction component to stand-up comedy, because there are some where an audience interaction throws everything that they've prepared because it's a script and less an interaction. So I think you make a really good point in that, for the stand-up comedians that are on stage interacting with the audience, which I would maybe argue that that's how to get the audience on your side, to lose that connection, just like that's the art. Would you say agree?
I would absolutely. That's the art. That's the reason I do this is to deliver messages to people and to entertain and get that reward. And I think a lot of comedians, the comedy writers, are very intellectual people. Comedy writers know what works and know exactly which word they're writing like poetry with precision selection of words and rhythms and things like that. But a lot of stand-up comedians are performers first and writers second. So our gauge for knowing what's funny and knowing what works is by audience reaction and by audience feedback. And that's something that's very, very difficult to simulate. I mean, you can simulate them in a Zoom meeting where audiences are invited into the Zoom chat so you can hear them laughing, but even then it sounds a little forced and it's a little artificial, and it helps exponentially. I've done shows where I'm performing to nobody and or a silent audience, and shows where I'm performing to 3 people who are laughing, and it does make a world of a difference. But you just can't simulate the experience.
Fair.
Yeah.
So you were talking about writing monologues, and do you think that by coming at comedy writing from that aspect, like have you pulled anything new from changing the way that you were writing online that's given you a different perspective for writing for the stage?
Yeah, I think so. Writing these monologues for the podcast, and then also writing articles and doing other writing projects and commissions as well. I wrote an article, five post-apocalyptic movies, the 5 best post-apocalyptic movies to get you through the pandemic. And I loved writing that because I started to learn, and there's so much more to learn about it, but I started to learn the power of the written word and um, how to subvert ideas in writing rather than in performance, because you don't have all of those. It's a more pure comedy, and it's a more pure writing style as well, because you don't have those visual cues, or you don't have the audible cues of raising your voice or timing the punchline correctly or anything like that indicate to the audience that it's their time to laugh. So it really does have to be funny. And then in writing, I found a new challenge, and I took to really funny writers that I enjoyed for inspiration. So looking at Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and looking at how the humor is in the concept, or the humor is in the image that you paint, because you can't really act out something in text. You can't really act out something in writing. You really have to use visual imagery through words to communicate those ideas, and funny sounding words. Oh, I'm in love with funny sounding words. I can't think of any right now, but like octopus, avocado, mitten. These are all like, they're just out of context. These words have humor in them. Yeah, and I've started finding comedy everywhere. Hip hop music, and looking at lyrical structures and rhyme to as like subverting a rhyme, or breaking a rhyme in order to punch a point, or just funny similes and metaphors, and all of these things in hip hop. Poetry, looking at oh my god, beat poets, and all of that, just sort of rhythmic structure. I found structure in you just find comedic structure in everything. And that's, I don't know where I'm going with any of this, but I just think it's beautiful that you can be a stand-up comedian, but there are so many other possibilities. There are so many other ways to inspire and find inspiration in everything.
I love that you're talking about structure, because when teaching comedy, they talk about the structure of a joke, and there's certain ways in which certain people teach it because it works for them, but there's so many different ways to go about it. So I just want to hear you rhyme. I want to hear. I just want you to have a joke now with rhymes, and then break a rhyme and make a joke. So I'm going to be waiting for it now.
I'm trying to write a small set about the evolution of hip hop, and I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. But it was my when I was really, really struggling to write new comedy and new jokes. I wanted to give myself a writing challenge that was unique and probably crazy enough that it could get my attention long enough to try it. And because I never got to do comedy mixtape, so Rush, Cassie, and Sarah Ashby's musical comedy showcase, because it occurs on the same night as Comic Sans Waterloo. So I've never been able to do it, but I've always wanted to. So I'm thinking of doing acoustic coffee shop ukulele versions of 90s gangster rap songs.
This is the most brilliant thing I've ever heard in my whole life.
Also exploring the evolution of hip hop from East Coast, West Coast, and how Notorious B.I.G. took the tempo and slowed it down, so he could go from a very a slower rhyme in quarters to a faster rhyme in eighths, and how that sort of revolutionized things, and all of those little I feel like Kanye right now because I'm going all over the place. Don't know if I'm making any sense. I shouldn't have had so much coffee today, but I think there's potential to find a funny sort of Fred Armisen comedy for drummers style set in there that just lets this queer white girl rap on stage for a little bit.
With a ukulele.
Ukulele, and I just think all of that is so funny as a concept that I hope I'm good enough to write it.
Okay, I have
Mhm.
0 doubts that you're good enough. My goodness gracious.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah. So that took a weird turn, but yeah.
But it's good. Has there been any weird moments during the like pandemic that you're like, that's weird? That was a weird moment in my life. It's not just the pandemic in general, because that's all weird.
Yeah, because the pandemic in general, I remember the first week or so of the pandemic and in the West End in Toronto, walking my dog and walking down towards Roncesvalles. I've lived here for a year and I still don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Roncy, walking towards Roncy and just there's no cars and no people, and that just feels eerie. The first time I lined up at a grocery store, the first time I had to like make an appointment to rent audio equipment from Long and McQuaid, or like the first time I had to just couldn't see. So I don't. We changed the way we buy things. It's funny now that weed is legal, we have to buy everything the way we used to buy our drugs. Like lining up at stores, or like I buy my breakfast sandwiches from a back alley. Like I pay the coffee shop and then I go to the back and then someone gives me the breakfast sandwich. And I don't know, that's all really weird. What else is weird? Um, I don't know. What made it really, really weird? So comedian Dan Udi, Dan,
I do.
he lives in my neighborhood and he had COVID symptoms. So he didn't want to leave the house, but he needed a prescription and he needed some groceries. So he asked me to go to the grocery store and drop the groceries off at his house. Um, and I brought them to his house and we just had a small conversation through his storm door, like the glass door.
Yeah.
And we were just trying to pretend that was normal, and that just felt so weird. So, so weird. Where, like, you were just afraid of human touch and human contact, and there was so much unknown. And then all of these things in the beginning of quarantine, I didn't take it 1,000,000% seriously. Like, Trisha took it very, very seriously. And bless her because she's probably the reason I'm still alive right now, but or still, symptom-free. Try not to be dramatic, but yeah, those first few things that solidified it as real and solidified the gravity of the situation. And just knowing that people I know all over the world are experiencing the same things. So like my friends in the US and in Uganda and in Australia, everyone is going through this together.
It's like the weirdest unifying,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Couldn't you unify with something more positive?
Right.
So was that the moment when you knew you had to take it super seriously? Was talking to Dan through a door one of the moments when you're like, oh,
I knew beforehand. Once I started seeing like numbers of deaths and the symptoms that distinguished it from just a flu that you would see, the symptoms of like heavy pneumonia and heart failure and all of these things that were like, no, this is not just a flu virus. This is something bigger. This is something worse. And then learning how long it takes to develop a vaccine. and how long that process is.
Yeah, who knew?
I thought it took a few weeks because there's vaccines for everything, but no,
Yeah, it's not an overnight deal.
we're still like a year away.
Oh, yeah.
So that was, can I ask you the same question? What did you have a weird moment, a moment that made you sit back and just say, holy shit, this is weird?
Okay, so the first, I started taking it super seriously quite early, only because I was at the office, working with my new team, and my boss was getting ready to go away with his family. And we had there was a lot of like questions to be like, should he go away? Like, is it a risk? You know, it was before the borders were closed and stuff. But I had cold symptoms and I was at the office and we were talking about it. And then I was like, I have cold symptoms. And then there was this panic of being like, well, you have to go because I'm going to like, he's going to see his family. And it's like, what if I had it and I'm giving it to him? And it was like this moment of just being like, oh my gosh, I'm a walking contagion. And it was just like this instant panic. And then I took all of my stuff home and then I called the school I was supposed to teach that night. And I wasn't allowed with my cold symptoms to go to the school. And all of a sudden I was like, not allowed in the office and I was not allowed at school. And at that moment, I was like, oh, I just have a runny nose.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Yeah, it was that moment when all of a sudden everybody's like, like, like you like, I basically felt like I had to be in a bubble at that very moment. And I was, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then walking the dog, and the first time I crossed the street to avoid someone and they thanked me, that was really weird because it's like I was so afraid of offending people by like avoiding them on the street, but just that common social contract of being rude and being distant is a polite thing.
Yeah.
Was really weird to me. Yeah.
There was this woman. Sorry, can I tell you one more story?
Yeah, of course.
There was this woman in the grocery store, and like, I'm really chatty. So, like with like customer service staff, like we're besties by the end of the transaction.
Yeah.
So I was walking through and like people, it's still kind of that way now, but people are getting over it a little bit, but people wouldn't even look you in the eyes when you were at the grocery store. Like no one was like making eye contact. And like, so this woman and I were both looking at ice cream and I went to move out of her way and we made eye contact and she's like, oh no, you can go first. And then we had a joke about how I was like, oh, I don't know which flavor I want. And then she's like, thank you so much for talking to me. Nobody will say anything. Like nobody will even say hi in the grocery store now. And it's throwing me. And I was like, that's so true. Like it's one thing to stand 6 feet away, but at the beginning, people weren't even like, the fear was so real that even making eye contact was too much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's so weird. That is. Wow.
Okay, so now we're moving into like, moving into the next phase. I don't know, phase 3. I don't know what we're gonna call it. But like performing and stuff. How do you feel about getting up on stage now? Like, are you like? I mean, yes, it probably feels good to get up on stage, but like, is there any fear about being on stage and in public?
There is. There really, really is. And the first show that I did, I let my guard down a little bit. Just because I was so happy to be back. And it was the 420 Cannabis Court show. So their opening night, it was a very safe. It was outdoors. It was everyone was distant, but like the comics were all off to the side and we were talking and we would like take our masks off to have a drink and then maybe not put them on. And then when I got off stage, I was feeling so good. I didn't put my mask back on. And without thinking, we were just like, a couple of the comics and I were taking a selfie. And then I posted it on Instagram. And then the next day, Trisha was like, this does not look like social distancing to me. I'm like, oh shit. Oh shit, that's right. Like I completely let my guard down. And then I felt terrible because I'm the first to advocate for like not doing park shows and respecting all of these guidelines and being really responsible. Like I'm even hesitant to start doing these shows at the end of August. So that really hit hard. And now I am very cautious when performing, and I'm very anxious about being too close to people, and I understand there's a risk every time. Um, yeah, it's hard for me because I just get excited and caught up in things, and I just throw caution to the wind. Like I'm a very stupid person when I have energy.
Oh, not stupid. I mean, when you come off stage, there's like that adrenaline rush, especially when you just like, like you have the audience, like you feel great. You're like, yeah, I could take over the world. And then, yeah. So, no, that's not stupid. Also, we've only been in this for, 5 months. And while it's felt like the longest 5 months, it's only
Mhm.
5 months. Like we have years, you have years of.
Years of conditioning and then years of having those same social routines or social habits at a show, especially where you want to, it's so hard not to hug the host when they bring you up on stage. It's so hard not to give high fives to people when you get off stage and all of those things. Like, yeah, you're right. Okay, I'm not stupid, but like, I'm very like small dog excitable. When I see a squirrel, nothing else matters but that squirrel. Yeah.
So how are comedians now? I mean, congratulating someone from coming off stage is never going to go away. So how
Mhm.
are you noticing comedians changing the way that are they air high fiving? Like, how do you?
A lot of them aren't. Sad. Like half of them really aren't. But a lot of people still are, and there's a lot of like the elbow bump.
Oh yes.
There's a lot of like, give me some of this, or just like congratulating. Air hugs are a big thing. Like it's a joke. Like, hey, air hug from a distance, and yeah, there's still the camaraderie. That's still there somehow. Yeah. Getting on stage and getting off stage is different now because that um the I'm at a loss for words, but the ritual of like putting the mic back in the mic stand or the ritual of handing off the mic and shaking their hand isn't there anymore because most places have two different microphones. So they're sanitized in between people and you just walk on stage with the microphone. So that ritual is kind of broken. So you just like you're like that's the end of my set and then you put the microphone down by your hip and walk away. That throws you off a little bit. Have you performed yet?
I haven't. I haven't. I wasn't feeling funny.
That's fair. That's fair. That's totally fair. And honestly, there's no rush. I know a lot of people are like, hit the ground running and get out there and start hustling as soon as you can. But nobody needs. If you're a fan of live comedy, don't listen to this. But um, nobody needs this really right now. Like people need to laugh. People need entertainment. They need to have a social event. But like for comedians, it's not urgent. It's not necessary. Everything will always still be there.
Yeah.
If it comes back at all, it'll all be there, But we're still so uncertain. We don't know if there's a second wave. We don't know if this is like, if things are progressing to the point where we'll continue to do
Yeah.
performances. So I'm still very low stakes about everything that I do. I'm still very like, okay, I'll do this one thing. And it's not building towards something. It's not getting back into the routine. It's just to be there and be involved and support the initiatives that are happening in this time. But I don't expect, Comic Sans is back at the end of August. That's not to say it's starting again on August 25th or August 26th. Who knows if there will be a September or an October? There's really no rush. Give yourself the time for that.
Thank
But,
you.
but also be mindful that if you want it to be, it can be your first time again. If you want it to, like, you have a chance to do that and to do it with like being 10 years old with everything you know now.
Yeah, okay, talk about that because I was reading Alval. He had a post about
I know.
such a beautiful soul.
I know.
But they posted about just like having the first time again and about how that's possible. So what was your next first time like?
My next first time was really exciting, and I wasn't really aware of it until talking to Al because I went to their first show with them. And they really solidified to me that yeah, that was like doing it over again, but with a bit of experience, and especially because it was all new material. All of the feelings were there, and all of the newness and the excitement and the exhilaration and the highs and lows and all of that was there again. Whereas when you're a bit more of a seasoned performer, there are times when you go to a show begrudgingly and just like, oh, I don't want to work today. I don't want to work tonight. I don't, I can do without the 2 drink tickets and the $8. I'm fine. And there definitely was no sense of that. Everything was pure joy. And everything was pure, like, it was experimental, it was high stakes, it was exciting, and it was just wonderful. And Al told me and made me realize, and seeing them like holding back tears afterwards, just being so grateful for the opportunity to have a first time again after, of course, 14 years of performing now. There's just a comment, doing another first show sounds terrifying. Do you want to see something cool? Watch the screen. There. Thanks, Ray, for the comment. Doing another first show sounds terrifying. It is, but in a good way. It's terrifying. Like it sounds magical. Wait. It is magical. It really is magical. Yeah, there is something magical about it. About just doing that thing again and falling in love with it again.
So is that sparked like you have a lot coming up? High five.
Thank you. Thank you.
Students all the time. But yeah, you have so much coming up. So is there this like new energy and momentum because this joy has been sparked again? Like do you just feel like you just need just so much more of it?
Yeah. I'm incredibly motivated to do things now, and I'm incredibly motivated to see other comics. That's another thing about going to shows is you see comics who are seasoned comics that you look up to so much, who are awkward on stage and working it out. Like it brings us all to a level playing field to a degree, where like we're all back at square one. And just having the opportunity to see those very seasoned and very experienced, wonderfully talented performers show a bit of vulnerability and show their process. I'm learning so much from that. But also just that thrill of performing. I want it again. I want more of it. I want it bigger. And I want it to mean more as well. And I think that's the biggest thing. We've all survived something now. All, and like you said, it's that shared experience. It's part of the collective psyche now, that we know that, like, humanity has a mortality, not just individual humans, but humanity.
Do you think that it's easier to connect with the audience now because we're in the shared experience currently? Are you finding that audiences just want to be closer because they haven't been able to have that?
Yeah, audiences are desperate, and because it's universal, because it's a universal experience, it's immediately relatable. So it's so easy to be funny by saying 5 months in your house, right? Like, my new set has, the intro is like 3 minutes of 105 days. 105 days. And just saying that's 105 days of working from home. That's 105 days of all of these things. And people are just like, you're right. You're right. That's a big number. Just quantifying that for people, they seem to love it. Yeah, it's very easy to connect with people because we all have something we want to talk about. But also just because we've seen some shit. I feel like I've seen some shit, and I know that time is precious, and I know that stage time is precious, and I know that reaching out to people and making connections, like, we're making connections from a distance and in more meaningful ways now, where, like you said, when this all started, we were reaching out and checking in with one another and being just more intimate as people, and I want to incorporate that in my work. I want to be more intimate. I want to tell more important and vulnerable stories, and I want to give examples of humanity. I want to talk about children and the new generation of people who are being raised in the middle of a civil rights movement and in the middle of a global crisis that can be unifying. People who are taught, who are grown, sorry, children who are raised by people who have this mindset. So children who aren't taught racism and homophobia and all of these terrible things. So they're not given the tools for hate that we were, that our parents were. And it's going to be so much easier to make beautiful people in a beautiful world. And I just want to talk about that. I don't know how to make it funny, but I want to talk about, and that's the challenge, of course. Yeah.
We could go into like a whole other topic because you could talk about like Nanette and those things where there's those deep moments and the joke comes out of it. So there's a place to talk about that and still have the comedic moments and just the beauty there's still comedy and beauty. It's hard to find, but yeah.
There's comedy in everything. There's comedy in absolutely everything. And I'll be walking through the park and I'll see a squirrel looking awkward. And I'm like, that is funny. Or like the way I saw this creeping vine thing that looked like it was rejected by a tree. So it just started wrapping around another vine of the same type. And I'm like, that's fucking funny. There's just humor in everything. I sound like a big hippie right now, but
Oh yeah, just wanted a friend. Of course it lasts, John. Yeah, I get where you're going.
yeah, there's humor in beauty. There's literally humor in everything. And yeah, Nanette, like, now that you mentioned it, that's something that has informed me so much, to teach me that, like, comedy is about emotional response. And the emotional response doesn't always have to be laughter. It can be sadness, it can be remorse, it can be excitement, it can be fear. We did the Christmas Spirits show where comedians tell ghost stories. That was one of the best shows I've ever seen, just because you're playing with fear and humor. And how much humor is there in horror movies? Horror is comedy. Oh my god, I learned so much from watching old horror movies about comedy and setting up a story and creating tension and all of those things. Like there's literally comedy in everything. Can I talk about queer comedy for a second? Because queer comedy, I don't know if this is one of your questions, but like I think that's what's so special about queer comedy is because queer people understand that really sad tragic shit can be funny. And owning and empowering things that are hurtful or upsetting or depressing or saddening can be liberating and also funny. And I think that's what's so special about queer comedy. And just to clarify, when I say queer comedy, this isn't just comedy by queer people. This isn't just queer people telling jokes. It's a unique brand because there are queer like JJ Lieberman or there are queer people who do not perform queer comedy. My sense of the term queer comedy, and also we have straight people, Ty Wright and Tyler Dombrowski are two people who have done our shows a couple of times who are straight white men with like no marginalization whatsoever, but they embrace queer comedy. Okay, back on track, Alice. Sorry. I think that's what's important about queer comedy because it comes from a place of truth and authenticity, and it comes from a place of storytelling and shared experience. And that's what I try to bring to shows. That's the kind of comedy I try to foster at our productions and things like that because I think that's where comedy is going. Comedy is becoming a TED Talk or a one person show or something like that. Like there's more to comedy than just setup and punchline. And the complexity of humor that we see in all comedy, not just queer comedy. You see it in Chappelle and Louis C.K., how there is complexity to their structure because you want to balance the superficial joke with something meaningful to balance it out with or to create contrast with.
Yes, and also there's also an education portion to having comedians who pull from their experiences, negative or positive. There's an education portion then. Would you say with when somebody comes with their shared experience, with that shared experience, they're educating someone on their shared experience that they might not have had. So
Right. Or sharing, a unique perspective. Unique perspective is essential to comedy. And look at Seinfeld. All of Seinfeld's comedy comes from taking a very normal, arbitrary, mundane thing and making it weird and making it over the top and funny. Sorry, what was the question?
I don't know if I had one. I was
Okay.
talking. Yeah,
yeah, I think relating to people and educating, absolutely. Educating is a huge part of why I started stand up in the first place. Was because I was early in transitioning. I had flipped my life over on its head and I was starting something anew and it was something I finally believed in and I wanted to share that story. And I wanted to help inspire people to say like you can take that risk and you don't have to live up to other people's expectations and you can follow your passions and it will bring you somewhere. And I think educating, especially for me and especially queer comics, when you go to Fergus, Ontario, into a dive bar, as an obligation to the audience, you have to spend the first half of your set explaining yourself as a queer person or a marginalized person, as a person of color, as a disabled person. I mean, one thing I learned from Courtney Gilmore is that you have to root yourself in what the audience sees and you have to address it. Otherwise, that's something it's unresolved in the audience's subconscious, and they're distracted and they're not like you have to explain yourself before the audience is on board with you. And for someone who, especially back then, was very visibly trans and very visibly different, just being on a stage was educational because it showed people that trans people do exist. And then by, even if I wasn't addressing it or making any bold statements or claims, just showing them that I can be funny and they can get along with me because I have a decent personality, and you can come up to me after a show, that teaches people that to accept trans people, and it humanizes trans people. And maybe if they see someone being harassed on the street, they're more likely to intervene, or at least they're more likely to see the trans person as a human, as a person. So educating for me is at the core of comedy. Absolutely.
When you first started, did you feel, I don't want to say a pressure because I don't want this to be it's a negative, but did you feel, what were your jokes? Did you surround your jokes around trans topics? Did you feel that you had to do that when you first started?
I did. And the first few shows that I did, I left feeling very uncomfortable because I was very insecure, and insecure about my body, about my image, about my voice, especially. It was very difficult to project my voice the first time I did an open mic. And as someone with a theater background, like I know how to project my voice. It just, the voice I was projecting was not the voice that I felt was my own or representative of me. And I was so insecure that I thought that everybody saw trans people as a joke, because obviously in the media that's what's portrayed. So a lot of my early humor was uncomfortably self-deprecating as a coping mechanism or as a defense mechanism, saying, hey, look how weird this is that I'm here and that I exist, beat people to the punch. um, And I left every show feeling very uncomfortable and feeling very bad about myself because I had just reinforced all of those stereotypes, and I had promoted transphobia essentially. Um, Fortunately, that quickly changed, and I felt for myself an obligation to show that I can be. I wanted to be a comic who happened to be trans, not just a trans comic. So I wanted to be able to tell jokes that weren't about being trans and were still funny. And I find that in queer spaces as well. I don't want to do queer jokes. I don't want to do jokes about being bisexual or being in a lesbian relationship all the time. I want to tell jokes. And then I learned that I needed to stand up for myself, and my messages they're more powerful, and my content is more valuable if I have a message of, whether it's body positivity, gentrification, uh, gender diversity, all of these things. If I can paint those things in a positive light while making people laugh, and I'm making a difference. Hopefully, I'm making a difference.
You absolutely are. You're 100% a leader in the comedy community and the queer community. You're such a strong voice. So when, like, did you start, when, like, was this when you were like, I don't want to do the self-deprecating humor anymore, this isn't helping myself or anybody. When you started to change the way you were writing jokes, did you feel, how did that feel? Like when did you just naturally come up with, like, by having a strong message behind your jokes, that you feel good about it? Was that something you naturally came upon, or did you like think about it to be like, no, I want to make sure that when I'm on stage, I'm delivering something that with substance?
It was a very active process. It didn't come naturally, and I think with a lot of comics, when you start out in comedy, and we see these at the incel open mics where people default to trying to say something controversial or shocking, um, instead of saying something funny and not being able to differentiate that. And that takes a little time to learn because in high school and in elementary school, like when you were the funny kid, you were the funny kid because you were saying terrible things to the other kids or you were making fun of the teacher. So for a lot of us, or you were being picked on and you thought that, like, a lot of my humor is about being picked on. Or in the beginning, the self-deprecating humor was people think it's funny when I'm picked on. Um, and for a lot of people, I think that's our first frame of reference in comedy when we try to write stand-up. Because we don't have the tools to write sitcom or screenplays or anything like that. So I think it's an important learning experience. Definitely, I found it harder to be funny when I stopped doing the self-deprecating material. I had to work harder for laughs, but when they came, it felt it more meaningful. I felt like I had earned it, and that was a great feeling and a great lesson to learn as well. That people talk about LPM, they talk about laughs per minute, and like the concentration of laughs. And are we asking what's the quality of laughter? How funny are the individual jokes? And can you have quantity over quality? Or can you have quality over quantity? And I think a lot of the greats, I remember watching Chris Rock specials when I was a teenager, and most of it was funny. But there were like 2 or 3 jokes in every comedy special that just stuck out, that just highlighted, and those jokes carry the show. Sure, it's important to keep the audience laughing for audio purposes and the taping and all of these things, but, like, those jokes will matter, and people won't look back and remember um, the small tags that are thrown in and the throwaway puns and stuff like that. Like, those are great, and I love them, but it's still important to have those very funny jokes, and those funny jokes come out of very well-written premises and very well-told stories. Yeah,
Can I ask you one more question?
yeah, of course.
What did When you chose not to do the self-deprecating humor and you found that the other comedy was difficult to write, how did that feel?
It was a struggle. It felt really challenging, and I found that I had to, God forbid, be honest, and I had to say honest things about myself. I had to tell truths, and I had to admit things like dropping out of architecture school in 3rd year. I had to address things about myself and really, really explore and examine myself, which, by the way, if you're, you know, a little trans baby or a little queer baby and you're brand new and you're not sure of yourself, if you can't find a therapist right away, start doing stand up and start writing stand up, because the process of self exploration and facing all of those fears, the fears about my voice, and getting to a point where I could be on national television with Ben Mulroney and not feel crippling self-consciousness or dysphoria was a huge challenge, and that was a huge path to take, and stand-up helped with that. Because I got to be myself on stage, but I got to be myself in my own terms, and I got to talk about what I wanted to talk about, and I got to say what was funny, and I got to say what was a good thing to say, and what was a bad thing to say. I got to challenge other comedians on a lineup and call them out for being misogynist or call back a joke. You said she was a dick. What was funny about where's the joke though?
Where's the joke?
Where is the joke? Yeah. There are great jokes about women with penises. But the punchline isn't she had a penis. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just getting preachy now. Yeah, and it's cuter when I do it. Yeah. So that was the first big writing challenge for me, was writing something authentic and writing something that was vulnerable and honest. That didn't put up boundaries and walls about my transness by making fun of it and invalidating my truth. Yeah.
Do you remember what you wrote? Do you remember one of the first things that you wrote?
The first joke that I wrote for the stage was how Grindr is just Pokemon Go, but with dicks. That was my first joke, and I was so proud of it. So proud of it. Because I was like, that's a real joke, because the more you think of it, oh my God. Yeah. That was my very first joke. A lot of my material was, yeah, I don't remember. I think I have the notes. I should pull them up and destroy them for them never to surface again.
That could be a phenomenal show premise. Comedians
revisiting their first. I love it and I hate it because I'd have to do it, but I love it more than anything. Oh, that's a fantastic idea.
Oh,
let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. We'll put a pin in this and we'll talk about it when we stop recording. Yay! Don't steal our ideas. There's
copyrighted.
3 people who are in the chat in the stream right now. You can't. This is. It's on record now. We've got it. You can't steal it. Dibs. Yay. Okay, I think we have time for one last question, just because my bladder is this big. I had a lot of water. So,
JFL
challenge.
Showcase.
Sorry?
JFL Showcase. Is there a plan for that happening? Do you know?
So the showcase, there are 3 initiatives that we're doing in the next 6 months to 1 year, because showcase season is in March, unless they change the schedule again like they did here. But in the event that we're showcasing in the way that we were showcasing before, we're definitely doing a Comic Sans showcase, and we're going to do a theater show. I don't even care. It's going to be big. I will lose all of my hard-earned money to do this, because I want to have a theater show, and I want it to be a celebration, because queer people being represented in something like Just for Laughs is monumental, and it's huge. So the showcase will happen next year, one way or another. The second thing that we're doing is we are going to be organizing set tapings So for comedians who want to showcase, we're going to film and record, and I'll do basic post-production to get people who are on the roster and people who want to showcase and want to submit a showcase have something to deliver as their 7-minute showcase set. In the event that we're not showcasing in person, people have a backup to say, here's what I did. And it would be sort of low stakes. We're going to do it at shows, and we're gonna do like a discrete taping of one person's performance every show or two. And then the third thing we're doing, I have an announcement. So Comic Sans is partnering with Howl and Roar Records. If you don't know Howl and Roar, check out their record company and their distribution company. They are an incredible comedy record label, and they just released Brandon Ash Mohammed's amazing new special. So we are pairing with them. Comic Sans is going to be doing the production, and Howl and Roar will be doing the distribution for Comic Sans compilation albums. So we're going to be producing our first album is going to be 6 comedians with 10 minutes each, and they're going to be professionally produced, and albums are going to be available at like our merch tables and on our website, and they're going to be distributed to major platforms, so people will be able to like get radio play and things like that. So yeah.
And how many have lined up?
We're doing them one by one. We're waiting for the opportunity to. We're waiting for the need to do them in order to produce them. Obviously, like at least three, because the first one we have. Sorry, everyone, we already have the comedians chosen, and confirmed to do this. It's such a tough selection process, but I want to get everyone who is at the level where they can showcase, but maybe not quite at the level where they can record their own EP. So there were people who were lined up to showcase last year who I didn't reach out because I think you shouldn't be doing this project. You should be preparing 20 to 25 minutes and recording an EP with Howl and Roar, and I'll try to facilitate that. But yeah, for people who aren't quite at that level but need something to distribute and are wonderful comics with a great 10 minutes, we want to have a product for them. Yeah. So that's going to be our new thing. So we're doing compilation albums, and then we're doing tapings for comics, and then we're going to be hosting a showcase as well in the future.
Oh my goodness.
And I think this is going to be like, this is a great segue to end the podcast, because this is talking about like things that are coming up and fun new things to look out for with Comic Sans. So a lot of different projects in development, but one is that hopefully in October, Comic Sans, the live stand-up comedy showcase that happens on actual stages, probably behind a painted plexiglass, will be launching in Montreal. So we're going trans-provincial. We're going, yeah. Montreal is such a beautiful city, and it's so funky and cool and so gay. It needs a Comic Sans. It absolutely needs a Comic Sans. Yeah. That's another thing. Also another thing I should probably mention is that okay, so I don't have the recording schedule, but I think this episode of the Corona Shift is coming out August 17th for Patreon subscribers. If you're a member thank you so much. You're helping to support. But if not, you can always subscribe to my Patreon, and that gives you access to exclusive content. You see this podcast 5 days early. If you miss the live stream, because that's free. You get deals on merch. You get an opportunity to be a guest co-host for one of our podcasts, and a lot of other fun stuff. Tote bags. You can get tote bags too. Yes, that aren't available in our store. They're exclusive, just for you, baby. Thanks for the money. Yeah. Anyway, so this comes out on the 21st, and then August 28th is when we will have our next episode of the Corona Shift with a very, very special guest. I'm going to be interviewing the incredible, wonderful, super, super sweet Canadian rock star Biff Naked. So we're excited about that. And if you subscribe to my Patreon, you have a chance to be a guest host and talk to Biff. Yeah. Yeah, that's all the news I have. Do you have anything coming up, Kelly?
I don't. No.
Yeah. You're so great at everything that you're doing, and I'm glad to see that you're taking time to focus on music and focus on that. And I'm sure, because you're just as much of a workaholic as I am, I'm sure you're making the best of this time to do it too. And I can't wait to see what you come up with.
Thank you. Yeah, my students, I'm learning how to use iMovie. I'm making compilation videos of them playing pieces. That's what I'm doing.
That's amazing. Oh, I'm sure they appreciate it so much too.
Some of them do, I'm sure. Some of
Oh my. Okay. It was such a pleasure talking to you. I miss you so much. I can't wait. I can't wait till I'm allowed, until hugs are sanctioned and I am allowed to give you the biggest hug.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I miss you so much.
And I owe you so many coffees.
No, you do not.
Coffee dates and all of those things.
I'll take the dates. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thank you for being such a wonderful guest host. I wish there was a live audience so I could say, give it up for Kelly Sanchuck for the amazing, incredible job and letting me get weird and talk about what's been on my mind. Yay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Let's do this. And that's our show. Thank you for tuning in. You've heard about all the cool stuff that's coming up. So check out Comic Sans on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, and not TikTok. I'm giving up on that right now. I'm too old for TikTok. I know it. Yeah. Check out our live shows if you live in Toronto and Waterloo. Check out the podcast. Subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your content in your ears. If you're listening to the audio version, the video version of this podcast is available on YouTube. So subscribe to the Comic Sans YouTube channel for this podcast in video form and a ton of other content. Until then, stay safe, be smart, be cautious, and don't fuck it up. All right, bye.